find others that they're in harmony with as much as possible. And so if you don't have a partner yet or don't have a triad, start thinking of who you can link with. And we have a number of people that are just associates that aren't linked solidly. So there's enough people to form a new triad if someone wants to work with that. But the most important thing here for right now in this point is for us to meet together, have nice sharing energy as a group, and work off the rough ends of relationships as we accumulate enough people to create the 24 that is necessary. Okay, any other comments or questions before we move on? We'll have a little shorter lesson than normal since we went over time. But beginning Rule 10, I'll again read Rule 10. It's DK spends quite a bit of time on this rule because it's an important one. As the waters bathe the form created, they are absorbed and used. Form increases in its strength. Let the magician thus continue until the work suffices. Let the outer builders cease their labors then, and let the inner workers enter on their cycle. And then he goes through the first part, which is thought form building. And we covered that last time. And the second section is on the centers, energies, and rays. And these are a vital part of all esoteric teachings. And of course, we know overall there's 7 centers and the 7 main centers in the body. And then there's quite a few minor centers. He's named, I believe, about 23 minor centers. And then there's all kinds of other centers that are more minor still. And then you come down to what he calls the nadis, which are kind of like acupuncture points in the body, where you have a lot of these points where kind of the nerve endings, which are externalizes nerve endings in your body, but originate as etheric points of energy. And through these points and distribution centers, the energy of your whole being has circulation going. He says, behind all evolution, there's 2 main centers, not talking about centers in the body, but centers in the universe. And the 2 main centers are the hierarchy and the soul, which first create the subtle matter and then the physical. Okay, behind all things, there's hierarchy. There's hierarchy in everything, he says. Now, in this way, talking about the hierarchy, DK goes a little bit against the grain of a lot of New Age teachings. A lot of New Age teachings say there's no followers, no leaders, we're all just one, blah, blah. But he points out there is hierarchy in all things. For instance, in the solar system, we have the sun and then the planets, and then below the planet is the vegetation on it and the life on the planet. There's always structure. There's always something higher and something lower. There's always somebody farther on the path than us and behind the path on us to the path of return. And those farther upon the path can assist those behind the path. Just as like if you were going on a dangerous path and you encounter some danger that you feel that the guy behind you can learn from without having to undergo danger, you can go back and turn around and you can say, hey, there's this danger up ahead, there's this lion up there or something like that. you need to be able to avoid him. So there's this hierarchy in all things. And so we have these two things that send energy throughout the universe, the hierarchy as a whole and the soul of all things. Those two things are transmitters of energy throughout the our whole universe, as far as we're concerned anyway. As a disciple is concerned with two main groups, each of them bringing his form aspect under 7 types of energy and influences. The two groups are the physical and the vital forces. First of all, he deals with the physical. The physical deals with the lesser lives, like the very cells in your body operate on physical forces. He says these cells give off a different vibration depending on evolution. The coarse person receives a different type of energy than the refined and more advanced person. So the very cells in your body, how they respond, depends a lot on the evolution of the person itself. They will have a different, more better response the higher up the spiritual ladder the person climbs. The second physical force deals with the sexual attraction, or what he calls animal magnetism. Now, sexual attraction is a very powerful force, and it's one of the most powerful on the physical plane. And so we have all felt that at one time or another, and it creates many problems until it's mastered by the disciple. Third, he presents kind of an interesting one I never really thought of before. He says the energy which circulates between bodies causing appreciation for certain types of beauty, form, and race. I never really thought about that as a vital force before, but so in other words, you see something of physical beauty, say a beautiful flower, a tree, a beautiful person. It goes beyond sexual attraction to just the appreciation of beauty, a beautiful form of art, maybe even music. So there's an appreciation that we naturally have for beauty, which is one of these physical forces that we deal with. He says these factors apply in the building of a physical body or even a race by higher lives, or in forming a group of disciples. These forces must be understood to produce harmonious creation. So to produce a physical body, the soul actually has to deal with how the cells are going to come together, has to deal with energies of sexual attraction and the appreciation of beauty. Your soul tries to create you to be as pleasant looking as possible. For some of us, our souls have succeeded more than others. But all of us look pretty good compared to what we could look like if our soul was really sloppy. But when you look at the beauty of the physical body, it's just an amazing thing how well it's engineered and put together. Okay, the second group that goes beyond the physical are the vital forces. Now, the vital forces, he says, flows through etheric matter of the physical, astral, and mental, and what he calls the lower quaternary. Now, he speaks quite often of the lower quaternary. We might have defined it before, but it's important that everybody knows what it is because he uses this word quite a bit and he doesn't explain it very often. I think he only explains it once or twice in all the books. Okay, does anyone know what the lower quaternary is? Okay, Joshua?
It's the 4 aspects of the lower self. I believe.
Okay, and what are they?
Etheric, physical, mental, emotional.
Okay, that's three. What's the fourth?
Oh, well, physical and etheric being counted separately. You could count the personality as a whole as the fourth one, and count the etheric and physical as one.
Not quite. He counts the physical. Uh, the etheric body counts as one of the quaternaries, and the etheric body would include the physical. Okay, and then uh, the the astral body, the emotions, and the mind, and then there's a fourth.
The personality, the total package.
Well, kind of. Total. You're on the right track saying the
Oh,
word
does
total
he?
package.
The
Prana?
lower,
You're talking about prana? Is that? Does he separate that from the etheric
Right,
body?
right. He says prana, or probably a better phrase he sometimes uses is the life principle. Okay. In other words, the life principle is encompasses the higher and lower, but it settles down in the physical realm through reaches us through prana. So the life principle is the fourth part of the quaternary. And as the life principle comes down and it activates the physical, the astral, and the mind itself. So it activates all these things. And so the very life principle descending through prana till it reaches clear down to the physical is the fourth part of the lower quaternary. And so it's important we get that in our minds, because he uses this phrase lower quaternary quite a bit. Okay. So he says the vital forces flows through etheric matter of the physical, astral, and mental, the lower quaternary, he says. And he gives correspondences of this lower quaternary. The first part, he says, the cellular life, which would be the physical. Related to that is the bloodstream, the heart center, and the thymus gland. Now, the astral part of the lower quaternary, the sensory life, the sympathetic nervous system, the solar plexus, and the pancreas all work together. The third part of the lower quaternary, the mental life, the spinal system, Ajna center, the center between the eyes, the third eye, the pituitary body. And then the fourth part, the life principle, it goes through all seven of the centers, and the spleen is the representative organ for the life principle. He says there are other aspects of humanity which manifest through objective form, which complete the entire man and make seven of his manifold existence. He actually lists eight, but he doesn't. It's like the life principle is like the eighth that is the synthesis of the whole. And so figuring the first three wouldn't really count the life principle, and so the additional four making the seven would be the self-consciousness, the upper brain, the head center, represented by the pineal gland, self-expression, the lower brain, the throat center, the thyroid gland, self-perpetuation, the sex organs, the sacral center, reproductive, and self-assertion, the center at the base of spine, and that's represented by the adrenal glands. He says the centers have three main functions. First, he says to vitalize the physical body. Now, this is important because if you have one or two centers out of whack, then the energy doesn't flow quite right. And this is a theory between acupuncture. They say that you go to an acupuncturist, they'll figure out it's different points where the energy isn't flowing, and it's puncture with a needle, and that stimulates, releases the flow of energy, according to the theory. So you have a better flow of energy, and this is why acupuncture is supposed to help you to heal. And on a larger scale, if you have a whole center not functioning right, your physical vitality will not be what it should be. Okay. Second, the centers bring about the development of self-consciousness to man. So without the centers, we wouldn't really be self-conscious as a physical human being. And the third is to transmit spiritual energy and sweep the entire man into a state of spiritual being. So once the centers are aligned and in harmony and functioning correctly, then heaven and earth, so to speak, is connected, and the person has not only soul contact, but opens the door to even higher than the soul. It says the vital force gives power of movement in animals and humans. Now that's an interesting thing that he makes. The centers themselves and in us, the lowest thing they do is vitalize the physical body, and the animals have this too. They have various centers, and it's different than the other kingdoms, which are the vegetable and the mineral. The vegetable and the mineral do not have power of movement. And the development of the centers from the animals up to humans have given us power to move. So you think of an animal in relation to a tree. The animal has a lot of freedom to roam wherever he wants to, and the tree has to pretty much stay put. And the vitalization of the centers produces that power to create a body that has power to move, which is a big advance in life when you think about it. When everything was being put together to be able to create life that had power to move wherever it wanted, that was a big advance in the creative process billions of years ago. When his centers are coordinated and working in harmonious rhythm, then spiritual contact is achieved. He becomes a custodian of forces to be held and used for the lower kingdoms of nature. So as we develop our centers, we not only have greater health and vitality, greater spiritual connections, but we stimulate the lower kingdoms. We stimulate the animal, the vegetable, and the mineral kingdom. And the DK talks about different masters, and when they become masters, some of them stay and work with the humans, and he says some of them work with animals, and some of them work with the vegetable kingdom by working with stimulating them and helping them with their evolution. And he makes an interesting statement about the animals. He says that human beings will become the saviors of the animal kingdom. And that's opposite of the way the environmentalists think today. They think we're destroying the animals and destroying all these species. But as we progress, we make a lot of mistakes. Humanity has made a lot of mistakes as they progress, but as we progress further along, we will become the saviors of the animal kingdom. Look at the animals in the wild during the winter, for instance. I mean, they freeze to death, and then when we have a big forest fire, they burn to death. And they don't have a very good life, a lot of these wild animals. And so I think we're going to work with nature to make their lives a lot more comfortable for them. And man will eventually switch over to a vegetarian diet and cease killing and eating the animals. And When we do that, we'll give them a lot more stimulation and be able to assist them in becoming more human-like and preparing for their next stage of evolution. So I don't know how long this will be, but eventually we'll progress, have such a good relationship with the animals that we will be their saviors. And even the fact that we do eat animals has a beneficial side to it, and the fact that uh, cows would be pretty much, and chickens would be pretty much extinct if we didn't eat them, because they can't live on their own. They have to be taken care of, pretty much, especially cattle and sheep. They have to be taken care of by humans, or else they would pretty much couldn't live in the wild. And so because we eat them, we take care of them, and it causes a lot more of them to incarnate. Now, the problem with a lot of farm animals in this day is that they're so mass produced, they're going to get mistreated. When I was younger, the animals seemed to be treated a lot better by the farmers, but now with the great big farms, they treat the animals as if they're not even alive, almost, some of them. So there's a lot of protests against that, and a lot of people are willing to pay extra money for, like, cage-free eggs and stuff like that, where they know the chickens are treated a little bit better. And so people are becoming more sensitive about treating the animals well. So even if we eat them, if we treat them well, we give them more of a chance to incarnate, more of a chance to evolve. And so this will go on for some period of time until eventually humans will switch over to a more vegetarian diet. One of the ways we're going to do this, I think, is they're working right now on creating artificial meat that they can produce in the laboratory that tastes just like regular meat. And when they get that perfected, people won't need to kill animals for food. And then I think this will be a bridge that'll switch humanity over to a vegetarian diet. And then when that happens, we may be able to fulfill being the savior to the animal kingdom. Okay, the intended mission of the centers, he says, is sevenfold. First, self-assertion, full development, the coordinated quaternary, the center at the base of the spine, the adrenals. So self-assertion is one of the purposes of the centers. Second, and that's mostly associated with the base of the spine. Second is self-expression, creative work, the throat center, the thyroid. Third is self-consciousness, and that's the upper brain, the head center, the pineal gland, the third eye, so to speak. Fourth, and he puts them in a kind of different order than normal. Self-perpetuation, the sex organs, sacral center, sex glands. 5, mental life. Oh, this is the Ajna center, mental life. What was that? The third was the upper brain. That'd be the crown center. Okay, the mental life is the Ajna center, pituitary gland. Sensory life, the sympathetic nervous system, the solar plexus. And the cellular life, the bloodstream, the heart center, he says. The 8th point, the vital life, the functioning through the 7 centers, that's the 4th part of the quaternary, and the whole system of lesser chakras and the nadis. From all that we know and express, the father aspect will reveal through the first ray, or the crown center. Now, there are more than 7 centers, he says there's and other. He says some of them aren't revealed, but he does reveal them later on in his other books. After he wrote this, he revealed it's either 21 or 23 minor centers. We'll have to tabulate them later on. But one of the popular New Age teachings that surfaced lately is that there's more than 7 major centers. Some people are saying there's 9, and some people saying there's 12, and it's saying like the crown centers at the top of the head, and then so far above the head is another center, and then a little farther up is another center. And I don't see any basis for that teaching. The Tibetan doesn't say this. He says there's minor centers that are unknown to a lot of people, but he never gives a hint of other major centers. But a common New Age teaching that surfaced through a number of channels is that there's 12 major centers. But if there is any more than 7, very few people even have the 6th and 7th, third eye and the crown center fully activated, or even the heart center. So very few people even have that taken care of, let alone some esoteric centers that are far beyond our consciousness. Yeah, Joshua.
In Letters on Occult Meditation, I think he never mentions the sacral center, and instead he talks about the spleen center, which is kind of odd because and he counts that as one of the 7 centers, but then in other stuff he talks about the sacral center as one of the 7 centers, and then he talks about the spleen as, like, I don't know, on the side or something like that.
Yeah, in other places he kind of talks about the spleen being kind of not a major, but a very significant center. And he also talks about the alta major center, that's where the neck connects to the spine. That's another very significant center, but it's not as big as the 7 or in importance. But so, yeah, the alta major center and the spleen are 2 very important centers. But yeah, it's interesting that he put that in place of the sacral at one point. It's probably right up there with the sacral in importance, would be my guess.
Even he was, I can't remember where this part was, but he was saying how 8 is the number of the Christ, and he tabulated, like, if you count the 7 centers and then count the spleen center also, that's 8. And yeah, but he was talking about that. So he, like, put them together at one point.
Yeah, he never mentions about centers being above the head, 3 or 4 more centers or 5 more centers or whatever, like a lot of these channelers are coming up with. You know, it seemed like when one person channels something new that kind of grabs people, then everybody starts getting channeled information in the same direction. So I don't know who was the first one, but I think it might have been the Keys of Enoch said there was a couple major centers above that. I think he was maybe the first one, and then people took off from there. Whoa, there's more than 2, there's 12 altogether, you know. And so 12 seems to be the number the channelers are going with. And so they're saying that, and they all put the location as you know, from 6 inches above the head to a couple feet up there, you know, and there's a bunch more big powerful centers up there that we need to access. And the Tibetan doesn't give any indication that that exists in reality. And even if it did exist, we would have to master the centers, the 7 centers, before we could even worry about such a thing. Okay, any other comments on that?
Yeah, I was recently, I pulled out a document that was called Solar Angels, and it was some of DK's stuff, and it looked at first like 4 paragraphs, and then I realized this is not paragraphs, these are 4 sentences. And I counted the words in each one. It's like he had one sentence that had 50 words in it.
I can believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, well, that's part of what the problem I have with reading DK is like he puts too much in a sentence, and it's like somebody's triad or group or whatever should work on rewriting some of these stuff and making smaller sentences so that they're more bite-sized and easier to understand, because that's an awful lot of stuff to get in one sentence and still make sense.
Yeah, that's what we try to do here. I'm trying to put his teachings in more condensed sentences.
It wasn't intended to be easy.
Yeah.
Then you should have read Rudolf Steiner.
Is he just as bad, you think?
He's worse. Or maybe it's a translation from German to English and Norwegian. I don't know. But
Try reading Krishnamurti stuff.
Yeah, now Hemingway, he revolutionized writing by, when he started writing, everyone was writing in real long sentences, and he wrote his books using short sentences. And everybody really liked it. That's one of the things that made him popular. He was really easy to read because he used short sentences and not a big vocabulary and just talked like the common man. And somebody came to him one time, I don't know if this is true, but I heard this story. Somebody came to him and says, what in the world gave you the idea to write in short sentences? And he says, I didn't know how to write a long one. So, but anyway, it worked for him. Okay, the lowest part of the vital life of God is the perpetuation of the species. The next important of the vital life is the I consciousness. Now, the animals share the perpetuation of the species, but when it comes to I consciousness, humans have that, and the animal kingdom doesn't. Then comes the expression of the indwelling self that is hidden by the personality. It's an interesting statement. Your indwelling self is hidden by your personality. So the way you present yourself to people in the world hides a more vital, true part of yourself. Finally, fourth, we have the assertion, and this is a long sentence of his, but it's a good one. I'm going to read it. Finally, we have the assertion or full manifestation of the divine nature. This, curiously enough, can only occur when the lower spinal center is aroused, when the energy of the material nature is carried by an act of will up to heaven, and when therefore the entire nature, material, sensitive, or psychic, and the existence aspect are unified and realized. Meditate upon these words, for they connote the consummation as far as humanity is concerned. So it's a lot of depth there. It says when the energy of the material nature is carried by an act of will up to heaven. Interesting thing to contemplate on, an act of will. So some of the final steps we have to take to connect heaven and earth in our own life come through an act of will. You reach a point to where you're actually going to have to use your willpower to take your next step. See how much time we have here. Okay. The occult aphorism, he says, is to will, to know, to dare, and to be silent. It has special significance, not heretofore revealed, and at which it is only possible for me to hint. He says, those of you who have inner knowledge will comprehend at once. When I see him say something like that, I really wonder about that. Some of his esoteric statements, I don't know if anyone comprehends just immediately. But a lot of his deeper things take quite a bit of contemplation to figure out. But he talks about to will. He talks about these one by one. To will, these words relate to the ultimate achievement, when by an act of the combined will of the soul and the lower man, unification is realized and brought about. And it concerns the center of the base of the spine. The Kundalini will eventually be aroused and raise your whole vibration up. To know, these words concern the Ajna center, the center of the third eye. The hint lies in the words, let the mother know the father. It has relation to the marriage of the heavens. To dare, the disciple must dare. That's an interesting phrase. These words give a clue to the subordination of the personality and have a close connection with the solar plexus, the great clearinghouse of desire and of the astral force, also the main center of the transmutative work. And then to be silent. This phrase relates to the transmutation of the lower creative energies into the higher creative life. The sacral center has to relapse into silence. Now that's an interesting thing. He talks about one of the great surges the disciple makes is to master the sexual nature, so you control it rather than it controls you. And to be silent means to be able to silence that desire, so it's under control, so it's not mastering you, so you master it. And this is one of the great purposes of the churches, why they put so much attention on morality, is because the churches are the kindergartens of the world, and in kindergarten, what the disciple must learn is to master the sexual impulses, so instead of it controlling him, he controls it. And then when he controls it, then what happens is you have energy rise up to the throat center, so the disciple becomes much more creative. He's able to, instead of just being able to create physical bodies, he's able to create music, writing, art, a good physical body to begin with, be a good conversationalist, create a nice, pleasant personality. There's all kinds of things that we create as we go through life. And so it's important for the disciple to raise these creative energies up so he can create things that are beneficial that go beyond physical form. Okay, that's about all we have time for, unless we have some questions. Any questions or comments?
Well, it says in the Bible some things that if they were known what they mean, all these things are made simple. It says, keep thine eyes single and thy body be filled with light. And
yeah, that's a really good one.
also it says, go into the upper room, which is that space between the pituitary and the pineal gland. And when you focus in that area, the forces of Kundalini and whatever rise naturally.
Yeah.
When you try to awaken the Kundalinis, like some of the popular things, it could be dangerous.
Right. That's one important thing that DK tells us, is to not put too attention on stimulating the centers, because they shouldn't be awakened prematurely. And even when the centers are awakened naturally and you receive a flow of new energy coming into you, it'll be a little bit disturbing for you even when it happens naturally. But if you do it unnaturally, it could be create a lot of problems for the disciple. So it's important to follow nature as much as you can, and follow the impulses of your own soul as to what's safe and what feels comfortable as you're proceeding. Okay, good points, Edward. Any other comments?
And yeah, regarding the silence, if you're doing a creative endeavor, and you're going to like create a painting or something, and you start describing it to your friend, well, I'm going to do this painting and it's going to have these three people that are going to be in this position, and there's going to be a lot of blue over here and green. It's like, but if you spill it all right there talking about it, you take away from the creative energy, and you may never end up painting that picture because you've already expressed it. It's already come out through the throat chakra or whatever. It's like, so like you've alleviated that need. So the silence helps build up creative pressure.
Yeah. Well, now Napoleon Hill talks about this principle too quite a bit, transmuting the sex into creativity. And he points out that before the age of 40, the sex drive is so strong that a lot of people have a hard time handling it. And then around the age of 40, they are able to handle it a lot better. And he says they become more creative. And he points out that most people achieve their greatest success after the age of 40, as far as in creative work for whether it's manifesting a business or their dreams or art or writing or whatever. So I found that an interesting statement that he made. It's but there are a handful that are very creative when they're young, but 40 does seem to be kind of an age where a lot of people begin to take their mission in life a lot more seriously. Okay, any other comments or questions?
Well, Picasso, he was active till he was 90 or something.
Who was?
Pablo Picasso.
Oh, did he live that long?
I think he lived that long, and he was active both in art and the other thing.
Yeah, well, hopefully I can be active till I'm 90, so.
Yeah, you better
or more.
stay.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. Any other comments? Well, good. So, Jill, did you get charged up with that meditation we did?
I did. I wanted to, come back and confirm that, but we kind of rolled right past it. But I did want to thank the group for their energy, because I definitely felt it, and the timing was good because it's around this time in the evening, about 5:30 my time, that I start feeling, an increase in the pain, and I haven't yet, so that's a good thing.
Well, good. Hope it works for you. Okay, everybody, we'll see you next week, next Sunday at 10 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, all being well. I'll send you a notification. And thanks for showing up.
Thank you, JJ.
Thanks, JJ.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Adios. Bye.
Life, light, and love, everyone.
Thank you, JJ.
Good night. Good night.
All right.
Good night.
Oh, Nick.